Well, hello. I figured I'd come here and wait, even though I know she's already supposed to be back in 45 minutes, but here we are. We'll wait. Some interesting, well, actually, kind of funny stuff that I'm posting right now from the socials. I didn't say any of these stuff. This is from the socials. Also from the socials. Apparently, apparently the Reeds have not been having lunch with the attorneys. They normally do every day. Second day in a row. In Daddy making snide remarks to attorneys. Thank you, Shill. I appreciate it. Big, big cup. You know you can't see the super secret guys on screen, but that's a giant cup of coffee coming my way from Shill. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yep. Think so. I think Monkey Boy refers to the brother. I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess we're just gonna see several reporters on the socials. Some from the free care and read side, or at least appearing a little biased that way. I mean, not unusual. I mean, they can have their opinions about things. Well, they're putting on there that they did not get picked for next week for allowed in the courtroom on the journal team. Neither was Turtle Boy. Again, not even on the reserve. Hmm. They put out a list every week. And some people that are on it this week are not on it for next week. I mean, it rotates, so understandable. I hope everybody had a good break. Are you ready? Are you ready for this afternoon? I don't know if I am. Seriously. I don't know how ready I am for this cross exam. What was it that Jared said before the break? Like the same question 175 times? Like, could be, possibly. Let me see. There's just so much going on. A lot of people are very upset about the testimony today, you know, uh, marking the fact that since it's the 201 call that gets deleted, that Jen McCabe must have made 200 calls in like a short, in like what, 2 days. I mean, they'll pick anything. They're also saying that you can delete an actual archived record. I don't think you actually can. They're following delete instructions for history and tag bars, and because it uses the word delete, they are actually saying that this witness lied. I doubt very much that this particular witness lied about anything. Anything. She seems very credible, and I'm not really looking forward to the uncomfortable nature of the cross when they just try to nitpick everything she said and intimidate her. I do hope that if there are any issues they actually point to them eh, with real facts. But I know it's just going to be innuendo and intimidation. Alessi himself seems very, very upset with the judge for not allowing anything. I mean, he's not like, I mean, he's just arguing it like a lawyer would. Well, she shut him down. She said, "That's the last time you're coming up here and doing it." She made her decision. She gave him two other sidebars after that. That's it. Well, there's some in LawTube that think that it was a no-brainer. She should have let it in.
I was told counsel wanted to see me at Sidebar.
Oh my good. That's number 10, and we're starting after lunch with a sidebar. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? That needs to be on the live trial couch. We need court in session, sidebar first, or end first, a sidebar. In first, a sidebar. We are back. Sidebar. I'm ready and also made the Discord window small enough just so I can slack off and play fishing. You're playing fishing again? Oh, nice. Well, keep yourself busy there, Shill, and thanks for keeping the numbers up in Twitch for me. Oh, by the way, I'm at 33 now. Only 17 left to get to 50 so I can pretty up my Twitch channel there. Just a reminder, if you do have a Twitch account, Twitch follows are free. They don't really make any problem. If you could just head on over to my channel at ClaireBear307 and just give me a follow so I can make my channel over there a little pretty. I'm trying to something new over there. There's not many people doing this live over there on Twitch. It's not very popular, but again, I don't really care about things like that. I just want to use the emotes. Yes, good morning. Good afternoon, Jean. Thanks for coming back. Don't forget to, everybody, grab your Jean Grow as you come in. Good to see you. Hey, Maggie. I'm sorry, I saw you come in before. I thought I said hi, but just to make sure. Yeah, it's become normal procedure, I think. But even Hank Brennan has asked to see her first thing in the morning. And thank you for posting my Twitch link there, Shill. Thank you. I'm not asking anybody to subscribe as members or anything like that. Just to follow. Just the free stuff. I did put this afternoon's feed on X also. So although we cannot see comments from there, I don't know why it doesn't allow me to bring the comments in. When I first started streaming on X, it did. I had all three in the same StreamYard's feed. And we are back.
You are unmuted.
All right, jurors. As you know, I think I told you in the beginning, one of my functions is to make sure that a case is tried fairly and efficiently and not to waste anybody's time. So if I get frustrated at lawyers about something, I try not to, and I don't think I am, but if I seem to cut somebody short, the lawyers are just doing their job. When they request sidebar conferences, they're just doing their job. I am going to try and keep all sidebar conferences to a minimum, but the lawyers are just doing their job. Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. Alessi, if you want a witness.
I just need a witness. Yes. Certainly.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Your Honor.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hyde.
Good afternoon.
I notice you have some documents with you. Could you just state what is in front of you so I know that I might be able to help expedite this if I know what you have in front of you?
Absolutely. I have the first digital forensic analysis report I completed for the previous trial.
Do you have a date? You have several of them.
I do. It's the first one. I apologize. This is the one, I believe it's May. I don't remember the
May
date
of
off the top of my head.
2023,
May of
perhaps?
2023, obviously. Then I have the second one. This was the one that was used in the pretrial motion.
December 2024?
December 20. Yes, that's correct. Very nice. Then I have the third one. This is the final one regarding the phone that was identified as Miss McCabe's.
Yes.
And then I have the fourth one, which is the phone of Mr. O'Keefe. And then I do have the opinion from State versus Huera, but if we don't need that, that's fine.
Okay, very well. I appreciate you telling me that. In March, and you recall on your direct examination, Attorney Brennan asked you questions going to your experience and qualifications. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, I do.
You were involved in a case, is actually a murder trial in the state of Maryland in a case called State v. Herrera as recently as March of 2025, correct?
Correction, it's an attempted murder.
Attempted murder. And in that particular case, you had attempted to offer various opinions to the court, correct?
I object.
You have to move along from this case, from what you're talking about. You have to move along from that Maryland case.
So with regard, do you recall another case from the state of Massachusetts, Arrington case, in which you submitted a pro se amicus? Do you recall that case?
I do.
And is it correct that in that case, you submitted arguments on behalf of the prosecution in that case?
I submitted an amicus brief, which is not on behalf of anybody. It's as a friend of the court.
Right, but the friends of the court, you took a position in that quote, friends of the court brief, correct?
Took a position on the evidence.
Right, and the position you took on the evidence was that the frequent location history data is reliable and should be used. Is that correct?
The statement is that I do not have that amicus in front of me. It has been a year and a half since I've read it. But that amicus does discuss frequent location history records. And I want to be clear, it speaks to both bias on both sides and negative and positive of submitting it. It was an unbiased writing, and it was not specifically in support of the prosecution.
So you are testifying in this case on behalf of the prosecution, correct?
In this case, I was hired by the prosecution.
Right.
That's correct.
And the prosecution is paying you for your services in this case, is that correct?
Yes.
And with regard to this case, you have been paid and have been on this case since May of 2023, correct?
That is correct.
With regard to the various reports that you have submitted in this case, you have mentioned one, which is a report with regard to the iPhone of John O'Keefe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you have, in that report, you have made a statement, have you not, that from 12:20:50 a.m. on January 29th of 2022 and after, there is no indication of interaction with the device. Is that correct?
There is no indication of user interaction with the device. There is all received until about 6:04 a.m. when there is again Apple Health data that picks up.
I'll ask it again. And you can feel free to turn to page 1529 in that report.
Page 15.
Page 1529.
The report is.
Would you like the
50
page of the
pages.
report or the page NDA number at the bottom? I can do either
Oh,
way.
I'm sorry. I thought you were saying page 15 in the report.
No. It's
I
NDAO
apologize.
1529 or page 7, whatever way
Page
is.
7. Okay, Roger.
Okay, so page 7, you see there's a heading interactive phone activity, correct?
Yes.
And at the top it says, using a variety of different artifacts, we can see active interaction with the mobile device up until 12:20.
Yeah, you have to
Slow down. Okay, sorry about that. I'm just trying to move it along, but I will be slower. I'll repeat, using a variety of different artifacts, we can see active interaction with the mobile device up until 12:20:50 a.m. ET. You see that statement?
Yes.
And then if you skip down, I'm going to skip a couple sentences to the paragraph under the chart, and this is the key part.
Okay.
It says, from that point, And I'm understanding that point to be the 12:20:50 a.m., correct?
Mhm.
Like, you need to say yes or no, I'm sorry.
Yes,
There is no indication of interaction with the device. Did I read that correctly?
that is correct.
So I am going to, and you believe that statement is correct?
Until 6:08, 6 something a.m.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just asking if that statement is correct. Not if you have other information, but is that statement correct?
I object.
Can you answer that? Ms. Hyde, can you answer that, yes or no?
Did I read that correctly?
You read it correctly,
Thank
yes.
you. If we could, Your Honor, have a document that is put up already in evidence and publish Exhibit 39. And it will be, thank you. And if we could go to slide 82, please. And Ms. Hyde, if I could draw your attention to the entry that is, it says 3209 under app lock, but we know that the 00 is a 12. So it's 12:32:09 a.m. on January 29, 2022. And I'm going to read what it says in red. And this is a timeline of Mr. Whiffen. You know Mr. Whiffen?
I do know Mr. Whiffen.
And so he put in red, not us. He said device locked with lock button for the last time. Do you see that?
I do.
And you know that to lock a phone, you actually have to hit the side button with regard to an iPhone to make it lock. Do you know that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that is an interaction with a phone, is it not?
I concur.
So that means that that interaction with the phone occurred at 12:32:09, correct?
I did not review that specific artifact. I cannot attest Mr. Whiffen's exam, only to my own.
So do you have any reason to believe that what is in evidence in this case that Mr. Whiffen has produced, and that do you have any basis to contest the fact that the device was locked with a lock button for the last time on the phone of John O'Keefe at 12:32:09 as you sit here?
I cannot contest it because I do not recall looking at that specific artifact.
Don't you think it would have been appropriate to be accurate as a digital forensic analyzer on the topic of the last of an indication of interaction with the device? Don't you think it would have been appropriate to look at that 12:32:09 in any of the tools you said you used on direct?
I did not correlate that artifact in my timeline.
I understand you didn't. And my question is, you make a statement. Well, let me back up. Do you understand that in this case, as in many cases, that matters of seconds in activity can be determinative of a case? Do you understand that from your experience?
Absolutely.
So it's important, therefore, to get activity right for any data forensic examiner when they're issuing reports about activity, particularly of a decedent. Is that important?
Absolutely.
So isn't it correct that the statement that you make on page 7 of your report, that from that point, 12:20:50, there is no indication of interaction with the device, is incorrect?
I cannot make that without going back and reviewing and validating the artifact you just produced from Mr. Whiffen. I would need to validate that in order to respond to that.
But as you sit here, you have no basis to contest what Mr. Whiffen has stated, that there was a lock button on the side of the phone of Mr. O'Keefe a full 12 minutes after you say there was no interaction with the device. Is that correct?
I don't. I would have to review that portion.
Is there anything that had prevented you from reviewing that in that data before you wrote this report?
Not that I can think of. I would have to go and re-review that.
My question is,
I don't know if that artifact, I have not reviewed that artifact, so I cannot speak to an artifact I have not reviewed, And I did not, that is not my report, that's Mr. Withen's report. So I cannot speak to that without going back and reviewing that evidence.
Isn't the interaction with the device, a lock button, readily available to you in the data that you have and had in your possession when you wrote this report?
Yes.
Thank you. If you could please turn to, in the same report, page 1528, which is your page number 6. And I just want you, please, to go to the, just put a placeholder in that. And if you could now just go to the conclusion, which is your page 50. Let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
So in the conclusion, you state that starting at 12:01 a.m. on January 29, 2022, the mobile phone was in use with activity of Waze navigating to 34 Fairview Drive, Canton, MA, active interaction with the screen, steps, audio playing, text messages and calls until 12:31 a.m. EST on January 29, 2002. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
That statement is also incorrect, isn't it?
On what basis? I
Do you believe that statement is correct or incorrect?
believe that the statement is correct regarding those artifacts that are mentioned in that statement, yes.
Okay, if you could please, if you could turn to page 1535 of the same report.
Can you give me my page number, please?
I will. I'm
Okay,
just.
thank you.
You're welcome. If you could turn to your page 13.
13, Roger. Yes, I'm there.
And do you see an entry that says 12:31:56, which is the same time in the conclusion, but I'm going to develop it.
I believe I know where you're going.
Well, hold on. I'm sorry. I need to ask the
apologize.
questions.
Yes.
I appreciate you looking to help, but if I could, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So it's got health steps and it has steps 36, duration 20.9 or 20.398 seconds. Did I read that correctly?
That is absolutely correct.
So if you look at this data point in your report on page 13, the steps began at 12:31:56, but they ended 20.39 seconds later at 12:32:16. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So therefore, your statement in your conclusion, if you could go back to 50, and this is in your conclusion, your statement there is that the steps, the mobile phone is used with activity, including steps, until 12:31 a.m. EST. That should read until 12:32:16, correct?
It depends on your interpretation of interaction. As a user is walking, they're not actively interacting with their device. It's their movement that is. It's not direct interaction with the screen. But I would agree to your view that that could be interpreted as needing an additional 20 seconds.
Isn't the more correct way to state the conclusion that the active interaction when it comes to steps is not calibrating using the screen, but the phone is calculating steps taken? Isn't that correct?
That is correct, but that's not interactivity with the device.
I understand,
Yes.
but the sentence reads includes steps, and the more accurate way to have stated that would have been to put 12:32:16 instead of 12:31 a.m., correct?
I'm sorry, you just said 12:30. I did this to the minute, not to the second. Could you rephrase what you were citing?
Well, I'll state it again.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So isn't the more correct way to state this important data point in your conclusion, instead of saying active interaction with the screen in steps, etc., until 12:31 a.m. EST, the 12:31 should be 12:32, because the steps that you have on your page 13, by what you concede, is the duration of 20 would have brought it to 12:32:16, correct?
I would state that depends. I believe either is a correct way to state that. Based on interactivity, based on your interpretation, your definition is more correct.
Okay, thank you. And it's not my interpretation. I'm reading from your report, correct?
Your interpretation that 1232 is a more correct representation of interaction is based on your theory that interaction concludes when the steps end. And I'm saying both would be acceptable.
Okay, so let's follow up on this.
Sure.
Isn't it correct that it isn't my theory when the steps ended?
Oh, it's
if I could just finish,
Please,
because if
absolutely,
we
sorry.
talk over each other, the stenographer's not going to get both of us. Thank
Agreed.
you. So it's not my theory. It's just the simple math from an entry you've made on page 13 that the steps began at 12:31:56. They ended 20.398 seconds after that, which, just doing the simple math, is 12:32:16. Did I do the math correctly?
That is correct.
Okay,
I'm not
thank you.
debating that.
Thank you very much. So now what I'd like to do is to go to page 1528 of your report.
Do you have my page number for that? I'm sorry.
Yes, and I appreciate that you go page number. So I just center in on the lower one, then I'll go immediately to the one. So it's your page 6, Ms. Hyde.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
If you could please go to Apple Health Data Steps.
Mhm.
And we've been talking about steps because they're important enough that you put them in a report, correct?
That is correct.
So let's go to an important data point, therefore, in your report, in the chart, which is the second entry, which is, as you've stated, 12:21:10 a.m. Do you see that?
I do.
And you note under the data that John O'Keefe's phone registered 80 steps at 12:21:10. Did I read that correctly?
You did read that correctly.
And those 80 steps constituted 191.253 seconds, as you state, correct?
That is what is stored in that database, correct?
And is my math correct, so that the jury understands this perhaps a little better,
Sure.
that 191.253 seconds equals 3.2 minutes?
Approximately, yes.
Approximately.
I'm doing the math in my head, so that's why I said approximately.
Understood. So am I reading this entry correct, that you're stating what the data shows, that 80 steps were taken by the phone of whomever had the phone of Mr. O'Keefe? There were 80 steps taken at 12:21:10 a.m. on January 29, 2022, for a length of time of 3.2 minutes.
That is what the phone registered.
That's what the phone registered. Very well. Now what I'd like to do is to turn to the phone of Jennifer McCabe.
Okay.
And that is, for your reports, you don't date your reports, so I can't give you a date, but it
I know,
says
it's report 3, I believe, is what you're looking at.
exactly.
Yep.
It's 3. And there is, bear with me, I'm accommodating your page reference, and I'll have it soon for you. It is your page 7. And let me know when you are there.
I am there.
Are you aware of an issue regarding the time of an interactive phone activity on Jennifer McCabe's phone at 5:07 a.m.? Are you aware of that issue, and particularly a communication to a person named Coco? Are you aware of that?
I would need to check in my report. May I turn to the page for
Absolutely.
that time?
And
I do
if it
see
is-
an outgoing call to someone labeled Coco at 5:07:21 a.m.
And you can tell that because in your report on page 11, you list a 5:07:21 a.m. call to a Coco as outgoing, correct?
Correct.
Have you discussed that call with any member of the Commonwealth?
No.
And again, this call is at 5:07 a.m. on January 29th of 2022, correct?
That is correct.
There is no duration listed for that call. And if you just follow my questions, if you can, yes or no, is that correct? There's no duration yet listed.
Correct.
So what I want to do is to also note that that omission is not the only omission of durations from this report, or I'll state it differently. Let me withdraw that. There is no population of the duration column for any call from 12:14:30 a.m. on January 29, 2022, all the way through this 5:07:21 call. And you don't start listing durations until 8:59:34 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes, and explainable. The artifact.
I understand
Yes,
Mr.
okay.
Brennan can
Sure.
handle those on his redirect.
Absolutely.
So there's not a population of duration of calls after numerous early calls and phone, as you call it, interactive phone activity. Nothing populated in this report until 8:59:34. That's correct?
Yes.
All right. Now what I'd like to do is to turn to the 22740 artifact that was the subject of much discussion on direct. And I am going to refer to that as an artifact. Is that a parlance that is familiar to you?
Yes.
And if I refer to that as a timestamp also, is that a parlance that's familiar to you?
Absolutely.
So I can refer to 22740 as a timestamp, and you would find that parlance acceptable.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to do that. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to refer to it as a timestamp. Now, you've been on this case working for the Commonwealth since May of 2023, correct?
May 4th, 2023. That is correct.
So you've been on this case for 2 years, correct?
Not actively the entire time.
But you started on this case in May 2023. You issued a report in May
Correct.
of 2023, correct?
Correct.
You issued a report in December of 2024, correct?
Correct. After being rehired in November.
Right. And you issued more reports in 2025, correct?
That is correct.
So all of that activity has been on this case, correct?
All on this case. That
And
is
that's
correct.
been all on behalf of the prosecution, correct?
That is correct.
None of that work has been done on behalf of the defense, correct?
That is correct.
So let us now go to the timestamp of 22740. Your opinions on what is the meaning of that timestamp have varied from May of 2023 until today. Is that correct?
No, that is incorrect.
Let's cover that issue.
Sure.
Let's turn to your May 2023 report. Isn't it correct that the report and your findings were pursuant to a request from Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully?
Correct.
And how many interactions have you had with Lieutenant Detective Brian Tully on this case approximately?
I really don't know. I'd have to go look back at email and call logs.
Is it more than 5?
Yes.
Is it more than 10?
Yes.
Is it more than 20?
I don't know.
So somewhere between 10 and 20, would that be fair?
Again, I'd have to review my call logs. I'm not
But it
going to
was
test.
more than 10.
More than 10, I'm sure.
So the issue was your use of various forensic tools that revealed a timestamp, 2:27:40 a.m. timestamp on January 29, 2022. Is that correct? Is that a fair characterization of an issue you looked at?
Correct.
So if you could go to page 5 of that report. And I would ask that you go to the last paragraph that starts with "in the instance of the Google search," and let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
So it reads, "In the instance of the Google search, house long to die in cold, that was recovered from the write-ahead log associated with the X browser state DB SQLite database with the timestamp of 2:27:40 a.m. was marked by Celebrite as having this timestamp and being deleted." Did I read that correctly?
Fair. Yes.
So you use the words that Google search, "house long to die in cold," was associated with the timestamp of 2:27:40 a.m. Isn't that what your words are in this report?
In that database, they are associated. That is correct.
Right. And in terms of page 3, if you could go back, of your report, under relevant findings,
Mhm.
it starts with, "There were 2 searches of interest that took place on the iOS device," and we're talking about Jennifer McCabe's device, correct?
The device that was identified to me as Jennifer McCabe's. Yes.
That's identified to you as Jennifer McCabe. And it's what you talked about on direct examination as her device,
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
It's not a mystery as to whose it is. It's not like you don't know, right?
In direct, I also use the phrase identified to me as Jennifer McCabe's.
Right. But your conclusion is the device you've been working on and analyzing for 2 years is the device of Jennifer McCabe.
That is how it was identified to me.
Do you have a different conclusion as to whose device it is?
I always am very, very careful that I did not assess the ownership. That was information that was given to me, not information that I personally assessed.
So are you uncertain as to whether the device you've been working on for 2 years is the phone
The
of Jennifer McCabe?
device that I've been working on for 2 years is the device that was identified to me by the Massachusetts State Police, Detective Tully, as belonging to Jennifer McCabe when I began working and received that device, as stated in the evidence analyzed section on this same page.
So let's go, and we're talking about, again, to get back to the center of gravity, we're talking about a timestamp of 2:27:40 a.m., correct?
That is correct.
And when you issued your first report in May of 2023, the timestamp you were looking at was 2:27:40 a.m., January 29, correct?
I was looking at multiple timestamps associated with the same 2 searches.
Right. So what I'd like to do, you said multiple timestamps. What times are in the multiple category?
What I was tasked to do was to look at the times, the search, the Google search history, I'm sorry, not Google search history, the Safari history, which includes Google searches, associated with those 2 search terms within that 12-hour period. That was the particular task, not the task of looking at the 2:27, just for clarity.
Right. And I appreciate that, but my question wasn't that. My question was, I thought I heard you on direct examination, which is why I repeated the question, what I thought I heard on direct, but I'll ask you the question.
Sure.
You looked at and talked about on direct 2 potential times for a Safari search, which includes Google, one of which was 2:27:40 and the other one was 6:23 a.m. Is that correct?
I analyzed the meaning of those 2 timestamps.
Right. So we're just talking about 2 times, 2:27:40 and then 6:23. Is that correct?
So you are only talking then about the one that we're also talking about 6:24 a.m.
Okay. So we
Eastern time for clarity, because some of these records are in UTC, some are in local.
Fair enough. So you've got 2:27:40, you've got 6:23, and you got 6:24 that you were looking at, correct?
There are other timestamps that exist in the realm of what I was looking at, but those ones, correct, are the ones that are relevant in this report.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about.
Okay,
We're just talking about this report.
Yes.
And so if you look under relevant findings, at the very bottom paragraph, you say, second sentence, a Google search for how long to die in cold at approximately 11:23 a.m. and then how long TIDIE in cold took place at 11:24.
That is in UTC. I apologize for not having the timestamp format there, but that is the UTC time. The UTC time equivalent in Eastern local time would be 6:23 and 6:24.
So to be clear, in your report, you wrote 11:23 a.m. and 11:24, and you didn't put UTC next
Correct.
to it, did
They
you?
should. You are correct. That should say UTC. That is a typo.
And there's a significant difference between 11:23 and 2:27:40, correct?
11:23 is UTC, so its equivalent in Eastern time would be 6:23. The artifact of 2:27 is already in local time, so that is in Eastern time. So what we would be comparing is 2:27 and 6:23 and 6:24 to be appropriate. They're taking into account the data storage and which ones are in UTC and which ones are in local time.
I understand your explanation now,
Perfect.
but in this report, there is no UTC time down. You have 2 additional times in addition to the 2 times, 2 different numbers added to the 2, correct?
The UTC was a typo. It should say UTC next to those. And the chart shows all of those artifacts in EST and is clearly labeled that they're all in EST.
So you would agree that it's better stated to state it a different way than you have in your report?
I would say that both are equivalent. I should have had UTC there. But yes, it's easier for the audience to speak in EST. I would say forensics examiners typically communicate in UTC, but we translate for our reports. And I should have either communicated that in EST or included UTC. I will definitely contend that.
So in terms of your May 2023 report, your first report in this matter,
Yes.
you on page 5,
Mm-hmm.
in the sentence underneath the block paragraph state, in the instance of the Google search, house long to die in cold that was recovered from the write-ahead log associated with
That's correct.
the X browser stage with a timestamp of 2027:40 a.m. was marked by Celebrite as having this timestamp and being deleted. Did I read that correctly?
You read that correctly.
Now let's move ahead to page 7 of your report.
Mm-hmm.
Up at the top above conclusion. Importantly, at this time, you state, testing shows great inconsistency with timestamps parsed from this file. It is, however, definitive that the page existed in a tab.
Correct.
While a definitive reason as to why the timestamp is listing the time of 2:27:40 is unknown, the time is inconsistent with the timestamps associated with the same search. Did I read that correctly?
You did read it correctly.
So as of May 2023, You said the definitive reason as to why the timestamp is listed as 2/27/40 is unknown, correct? I'm just asking, is that what you wrote? Unknown.
I believe that the wording here is, sorry, I know I do use the word unknown. It says, while a definitive reason as to why the timestamp listing is the time of 02/27/40 is unknown. Sorry.
So you use the word unknown, your word in your report.
Yes.
Okay, so now what I'd like to do is to go on to the first proceeding in this matter. Do you remember giving testimony in a proceeding about a year ago under oath?
Yes, I do.
I am now going to go to that testimony, and if at any point you would like to have a copy of that, if it's the honor, if your honor would like, I will do it, but I'm going to start and then we'll see how it goes. So bear with me a moment. Do you recall in that testimony stating that you processed the image in several forensic tools? I use Celebrite Physical Analyzer, and then you list many other tools. Do you remember giving that testimony?
We have a page.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan, I thought I'd given it 1-12. My apologies if I didn't. It's June 14, 2024, page 1-12.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So do you recall giving testimony about the various tools you use for this timestamp?
I do.
And do you recall stating that those tools were commonly used digital forensic tools that are very standard? Do you recall that?
I'd have to see the wording that I used at that exact time.
Would it be helpful to refresh your recollection if I showed you that?
It would be great. I would greatly appreciate that because I do not recall the precise wording, but I know that I
Fair
spoke to the
enough. I'll
tools
get
I
that for
used.
you. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, Mr. Alessi, you offered a transcript. Do you have the whole
I have the
transcript?
whole transcript if that helps.
It might speed things along.
Agreed.
Okay.
We have one out, but if I'm Ms. Hyde, I'm going to give you a transcript.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's, let me turn it over to you. It's going to be 112.
Okay.
Yep. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And you said we're on 112?
Yes, please.
113, I see it. I see it's highlighted on the copy, so I
Right,
figured
so
that's the
what I
one.
wanted to do, the reason I said 112 is that's where I
Oh,
started with my
sorry.
previous question. So I'm not going to repeat the question, but just to orient you, so you have a fair context for the questioning.
Fair.
So I started at the bottom, 112, now I'm moving to 113, and I'm starting with line 7. Do you see that?
I do.
And it says, yes, they are commonly used digital forensic tools that are very standard for other forensic examiners to use on mobile exploitation. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct.
And then if you go down to line 22, you testified in that proceeding. So it's important to use multiple tools so you can see the results from different data sets, and be able to compare those results and enhance those with manual analysis. Did I read that correctly?
You did. That's correct.
And then going up to page 114, line 5.
Slow down a little bit, Mr. Alessi.
I will, Your Honor. Thank you. Yeah, that's very, very typical for me to process with multiple tools to ensure that I'm getting the most complete interpretation from forensic tools. Of course, you go beyond that with your analysis, but it's absolutely pertinent to that. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct.
And then lastly, for this section at page 114, 17, the Sanderson tool is meant to look at specific type of data structures called the SQLite database. XQLite databases are very nuanced, and this particular tool allows you to take that database and explore it at a deeper level than the other forensic tools allow. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Thank you. Now if we can go to page 124 of the very same testimony. And feel free to go back a page just so you can see to page 123 that the topic is the 2/27/40 timestamp associated with house long to die in cold. Do you
Can I
see-
have a moment just to review and get context?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Page 123:13, but if you need to go back further, feel free.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what I want to do is start with page 1-23, and this is your testimony. On line 16,
Mm-hmm.
I have them in the timestamp order that is associated with the artifact. You use that word associated again, correct? Did I read that
Correct.
correctly?
Yes.
And that's associated with the Google search "How long to die in the cold" in a 2:27:40 a.m. timestamp, correct?
That is correct.
Now, if you turn the page of the testimony, you state back then that on page 124, line 1, the browser state DB is an artifact that speaks to when tabs are moved. So when you're using your browser and you open different tabs, you may have a search that this time pertains to the time that the tab moved. It could be lots of things. Did I read
Correct.
that correctly?
You did.
Not one thing, you said it could be lots of things, correct?
That is correct.
And then you go on in line 10 and you talk more, and then you go down to the bottom. You go down to line 20 and you testified, we cannot tell by this particular artifact what time that search occurred. Did
Absolutely.
I read that correctly?
It's specifically pertaining to that particular artifact that gives in browser state DB that does not tell us what time a search occurred. That is correct.
Right. So you stated, and it was your statement then, we cannot tell by this particular artifact what time that search occurred, correct?
That particular artifact.
Okay, so now let's keep going.
Mhm.
If you go to page 129 of this transcript,
I'm there.
at the top,
Sure.
line 1, 2:27 isn't necessarily one time when the tab was closed. That's in my report. I say it's undetermined. Remember, we were just reading your undetermined
Absolutely.
in your May 23 report?
Correct.
Because there's a lot of things that can cause that timestamp to be there, including tab being moved, tab being minimized. The next sentence. I don't know exactly what caused the tab to get that particular entry, but it's not, that timestamp is not indicative of the time of the search or any URL that's visited. But the first part of it is, I don't know exactly what caused the tab to get that particular entry. Did I read that correctly?
You read 100% correctly.
Thank you. Now, if we could turn to page 130 of your testimony.
I need to object.
I'll see you both.
I'll need to object also. Relevancy, you are taking one word from one sentence to try to correlate it to another definitive statement that she made in regards to your 227 timestamp you have an issue with. And you're twisting and twisting and twisting. And she's doing a good job at saying, the correct answer in regards to that artifact in that database, at that particular moment. You can't take that moment, stretch it over here into this part of the report to try to turn it into something else. I mean, I hope you didn't lose much sleep highlighting that report last night, Alessi, because you're trying to build something that doesn't exist. And this really annoying overemphasizing the words to try to get the jury's attention by barking is the only word I could think of to describe the way he goes, unknown. Sorry about your ears, or whatever he's trying to emphasize. Like, I would like to remind the defense, you are not in an episode of Law and Order. This is an actual courtroom. Could you remember you're freaking lawyers and not actors and just do what you got to do? I know you don't want to go with her testimony and you'd rather believe that everything she said is wrong and you want to discredit her because she is really, really accredited in what she's doing. And you're trying to ruffle her and you're trying to twist her words. But she's remaining calm and you're looking a little, you're a master at this. I get it. You're known for this, Mr. Alessi. I will dismantle the facts. But if you get an unruffled expert that actually knows what they're talking about, you're going to lose the jury again. I'm just saying. You guys are lawyers. It's what you went to school for. As far as I know, you don't have any of the secondary degrees in arts and science or whatever. So quit with the theatrics and just get to the damn lawyering. You'd do better. You really would. Well, this is annoying as hell. Sorry. Oh, sorry, guys. This is really annoying me. Yeah. Not only straws, I don't even know. He actually makes his point, yells, does all these pointing in theatrics, and I'm like, so? Yeah, she said the word unknown. Because, she's not going to... Well, she said the unknown in a full sentence of context that actually meant something else. More than likely, Turtle Moves at this point, he's got a whole hung audience at this point. Nobody knows he is a Rolf. And by the way, that was Sidebar. Oh gosh, have we hit 11 already? Is it 10? I think we hit 10 already. Let's Sidebar 10. I know. It's just frustrating. I know they're doing their job, but it's really annoying when they take these tactics. Welcome back, Judge. You look tired. Welcome back, Professor Hyde.
Thank you for your patience, Ms. Hyde.
Absolutely, sir.
What I'd like to do is to go back to your testimony in the first proceeding, and we can go back to page 1-30.
I am there.
Thank you. So I am going to go back just because there's been some time and give some context. So we're talking about the 2:27:40 a.m. timestamp, correct, at this page location?
We've been talking about that for several pages. Yes, that's correct.
You're absolutely correct. We've been talking about it for several pages. And bear with me. I think this may be either the second to last or the last. So there you testified with regard, this was when you're referring to an artifact. You've agreed that timestamp is a fair synonym. You say on line 5, that means it wasn't in the regular database. It was in the write-ahead log. And to Celebrite's credit, that tool actually parsed the write-ahead log and displayed it where the other tools did not. So did I read that correctly, number one?
You read it correctly.
So am I correct that here, what you're stating is Celebrite was actually showing the 2:27:40 a.m. timestamp at that time during your testimony in the first
On
proceeding?
that date, that is correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so I just wanted to establish that, and you were giving
Absolutely.
Celebrite credit for actually showing that timestamp at that time of 2:27:40 at the time of your testimony back in June of 2024, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so now let's go to page 1-36.
136, you said?
136, yes.
Thank you.
And on line 12, you note that so Celebrite and magnet axiom,
Mhm.
and then you elaborate both Celebrite physical analyzer, which is a specific tool, right, of
Correct.
Celebrite, and magnet axiom, another specific tool, correct?
Correct.
Both have file system viewers that then have SQLite database viewers. And you skipping down to line 17, you talk about they don't allow for deep analysis of the write-ahead logs, which is why in my analysis I use the specialized Sanderson forensic browser for SQLite, correct? I read
That is correct.
So is it fair to say that what you did up to this point in June of 2024, with regard to the 2:27:40 a.m. timestamp on January 29, 2022, you applied a variety of tools to analyze the issue of when did the Google search occur, that you use the words associated with a Safari Google search, house long to die in the cold.
There's a little bit of wording I would correct there if that's okay.
Right, but so let me see if I can ask the question
That'd be
a
great.
different, more simple way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you used a variety of tools to analyze that house long to die in the cold search, correct?
Plus manual analysis and testing. Yes.
Plus manual analysis and testing. Alrighty, now let's leave the testimony
Okay.
and let's go to your next report. And your next report is December 2024. Do I have
I have
the
it correct.
chronology correct, Ms.
That
Hyde?
is correct.
So in December of 2024,
Mhm.
just approximately 6 months ago, you issued another report, correct?
That is correct.
And you got the request for that report also from the Norfolk District Attorneys, correct?
That is correct.
And you state in regard, well, that report regarded the analysis of the same timestamp, correct?
Correct.
To 2:27:40 timestamp.
Mhm.
And in that report, under relevant findings, you state, and this is December of 2024, so it's from your May 2023 report, it's approximately a year and a half. Is that approximately from your May 23rd report?
Approximately.
Approximately a year and a half?
Yes.
So a year and a half after what we just reviewed in your May 23rd report, and then just months after the testimony of June, right? So about 6 months after your
6 months later.
June testimony that we just went through, you went and looked at this issue again, correct?
That is correct.
And isn't it correct that when you were asked to look at the same timestamp in December of 2024, that Celebrite removed the timestamp from their tools?
Celebrite did remove that timestamp from the tool. That is correct.
Okay. And that timestamp was the subject of extensive reports and testimony that you participated in the first proceeding, correct?
That is correct.
And even though that timestamp, 2:27:40 a.m., that showed up in Celebrate Tools, Magnet Forensic Axiom showed up, that was removed by Celebrate, correct?
Celebrate no longer reports it. The evidence is still in the data. I want to be clear, just that it doesn't change the data. They just removed it from their automated parsing and reporting.
Right, so they
Correct.
removed it from their automated parsing and reporting, correct?
Yes, they did. That is correct.
However, your former company, Magnet Forensic Axiom, still shows it. correct?
Magnet Axiom Forensics currently shows it as a carved artifact and still shows that and gives a description in their artifact reference guide as to what they believe causes that artifact.
I'm going to ask the question.
Yes, it does.
Magnet Axiom Forensic, where you used to be the director of forensics,
That is correct.
still shows that timestamp, right?
Yes, yes,
But Celebrate doesn't in the automated
that is correct.
tools.
That is correct in their automated parsing.
And you would agree that Magnet Forensics is a very reputable company, correct?
Correct.
Let's go back to your December 2024 report. Do you recall just moments ago when we went through your testimony in June of 2024 in the first proceeding where you stated various times how it was, I'll use the term best practices, to use multiple tools to analyze the timestamp?
Correct.
And you used many tools back
I've
then
used-
to analyze that timestamp. And you testified to those many tools on your direct examination, correct?
Correct. Yes.
However, in December of 2024, when you returned to analyze the 2:27:40 timestamp, how many tools did you use to analyze that timestamp? Can you give me just a number? How many tools?
At least 4.
Well, in your report, let's go to your report, what your report says.
Mm-hmm.
So in your report, you state that under relevant findings, do you not, that review of data from Celebrite shows that the artifact of a Google search from a Safari suspended state tab with the search term house long to die in cold, and I'm going to skip over, in addition to my own previous report, no longer shows a last visited timestamp.
I think that is not clear. The skipping there makes it sound like my report no longer shows that, and that's not what's being
That's a
stated.
fair statement. That's a fair statement. Let me rephrase it this
Thank
way.
you.
You're welcome. In this report,
Mhm.
you speak about Celebrate release reports, correct?
Are you referring to the Celebrate release notes
The
that come out?
release notes at the bottom,
Perfect.
right? You referred to that?
That's correct.
And that release note states that Celebrate has removed the timestamp value from records, and I'm assuming that's a reference to Celebrate's.
Celebrate no longer parses that result. That is the statement in this report. Correct.
Right. And so I'm going to go to page 4 of your report.
For sure. I'm there.
And I'm going to go down all the way down to the conclusion. In that report, is there reference to any company other than Celebrate in this entire report? Is
In
there?
this report, no.
Okay, thank you. Now let's go to your prior testimony
Mhm.
in the first proceeding, where you said that it was important to use multiple tools.
Absolutely.
Do you still stand by your position that you've given today and that you gave in June, that it's important to use multiple tools.
Absolutely.
Now let's go back to the issue of the extraction of Jen McCabe's phone. And what I want to do is to cover a concept and see if I've got this correctly. Are you familiar with the phrase Apple source codes?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat?
Absolutely, no worries, sir. Are you familiar with the phrase Apple source codes?
Apple's source code? Absolutely, yes.
And isn't it a fact that Apple keeps its source codes proprietary, meaning very few people have access to it?
That's correct. It is closed source is the term we would use.
Closed source.
That would be the term of art, correct?
And they keep it so close that they call it closed source.
And it's not just Apple. Lots of tools are closed source. That just means that the code isn't available like it would be for the tool I mentioned earlier, iLeap. That's an open source tool. Anyone can look at the code. For Apple, we cannot go look at the code that makes your phone run. That's correct.
And isn't it the case, and I refer to that as the MB postulate, it's a shorthanded, but I don't need to have you refer to it that way.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that phrase? I was unfamiliar with it.
I'm going to skip it.
Okay,
I'll
thank
just
you.
go on. Basically, the concept that Apple has source codes that are closed sources. So I just refer to them as Apple's closed sources. Wouldn't the best information about when a search occurred, what it's associated with, wouldn't the best information be in the Apple source code to answer that question?
It is acceptable in digital forensic science and in accordance with the NIST Science Foundation papers to conduct testing to determine how the functionality of something works. You do not need access to the source code to be able to speak to an artifact.
My question isn't that. My question is, isn't the best place the best place to go is to the Apple source codes themselves? Or are you saying these physical analyzer tools are just as good, and the information they pull is just as good as an Apple source code?
Those are very, very, those are incongruent statements. Apple's source code is not a healthy way to do an examination because it would be so onerous, and we do not know the level of documentation. We don't know the language. That is not necessarily the most effective way to determine what data is. Forensics tools parse results of how data is. They don't interpret them. The examiner interprets them and provides meaning. And I would like to state that those three things should not be conflated. They are very individual concepts.
I think you misunderstood my question.
I probably did it because that's what I was seeing.
My question is this. Isn't the best source for information about data in an iPhone contained within Apple source codes?
Not necessarily. Because that doesn't perform, operational performance is a better source in a practical sense to being able to determine what something is, as opposed to zillions, and no, I don't know the number because it's closed source, lines of code that may or may not have different levels of documentation. Apple themselves wouldn't be able to, any individual there who has access wouldn't know every feature of how every element works. Testing through the methodologies described in NIST is the accepted methodology in our science, not reviewing the source code.
I'm going to try it a different way. I understand what you're saying is, if I got it correct, you correct me. Are you saying that these physical tools make it easier to interpret and view the data?
I did not speak about the tools at all in the statement I just made.
Okay.
I spoke about manual testing and checking the functionality and what results. Parse tools, again, these are three separate concepts. The concept of code and actually reviewing code to make a determination is different from parse tool results, is different from doing testing and validation. Those are separate concepts. They should not be commingled as if they equate to each other.
So have you ever spoken with Mr. Whiffen? Ian Whiffen?
I have spoken with Mr. Whiffen historically, but not since the term of this trial.
Okay. Have you ever spoken to Mr. Whiffen about whether the Apple source codes are the best source of information about topics like timestamps? Have you ever spoken? That's just a
I have
question.
not had
Have
that
you ever talked to him?
conversation with Mr. Whiffen, no.
Okay, all right. I want to move on to, and do you regard Mr. Whiffen as a reputable?
Mr. Whiffen is a reputable forensics examiner, and I've actually reviewed his work in other instances and peer reviewed his papers.
So you have regard for his
I have regard
reputation?
for his
I'm sorry,
reputation.
we have to wait for each other.
Oh,
to
yes,
talk
I'm
through the
sorry.
trend. It's all right, no worries. So you have regard for the opinions of Mr. Whiffen generally, correct?
Absolutely,
And
yes.
you believe he has a solid reputation, correct?
Absolutely, that is correct.
Now let's turn to the History DB database. You are familiar with History DB? History DB, are you familiar with that phrase?
I am familiar with that phrase.
Okay. Do any of the house-long searches appear in the History DB?
In this instance, no, we do not have artifacts in the history DB of either of those two searches.
So I want to just repeat that in a different way. So the History DB, is that considered a valid and valuable source of information in an iPhone?
That is a valuable artifact for Safari history. That is correct.
But the house-long searches we've been discussing do not appear in that History DB, do they?
That is correct.
You spoke about PYF, PDF on your direct testimony. Do you recall that?
I do. It's the Python framework for PDF. It is a GitHub tool, a tool one can download from GitHub to utilize to create PDFs using Python code. So a developer and a tool would integrate that to create a PDF.
And the PYF, PDF can have the variables set, correct?
Yes, the Python script allows the developer to set things such as their name that they created the document. Yes.
I want to go to the extraction of Jen McCabe's phone that you talked about on direct examination. Is the hash value signed or unsigned?
A hash value isn't signed. I believe your question you're asking me is if the Adobe document that contained the PDF that contained the hash values, are you asking me if that's signed? Because a hash value is something that matches. A hash value isn't signed.
Let me ask it this way. Is there any hash value associated with Jen McCabe's phone that is unsigned?
That is not a valid question. I apologize. We don't refer to hash values as being signed or unsigned. We would refer to the PDF that contains that value as being signed or unsigned.
Have you ever read a report of Mr. Ian Whiffen in this case?
I have, but I have to be clear. I have not read all of Ian's reports. I've only read some, so I don't know if I read some of his earlier reports.
Do you recall reading a report of Mr. Whiffen where he references a hash value being unsigned associated with the iPhone of Jennifer McCabe?
Can I see said report so I can validate if I did or did not? I'm not sure based on just that, because I wouldn't use the term hash value being signed. I did see a report in which Mr. Whiffen spoke to the PDF not being signed.
I just want to try to shortcut this and work off your last statement. You're now saying you do recall seeing a report of Mr. Whiffen where he said a PDF was unsigned?
I need to see, I do remember him referencing the PDF. I would need to see the report, especially since the characterization of hash value being unsigned is not a term of art that I am familiar with in our field.
Let me ask if you agree or disagree with this statement. This value can be used to compare with the original hash calculated at the time of extraction in order to validate the extraction data. However, this requires authentication of the original hash value, which is not possible with gray key extractions, as the PDF containing the extraction hash value is unsigned. Therefore, this hash value could be used as a suggestion of authentication, but cannot be guaranteed 100%. Do you agree or disagree with
His
that
statement there says the PDF is unsigned, not that the hash value is unsigned.
Right, but it's nonetheless unsigned, correct?
The PDF is not signed. That is a correct statement. Gray key PDFs that purport that value are not an Adobe signed document.
Do you know the history of the extraction of Jen McCabe's phone? It's yes or no.
Can you provide more clarity? What do you mean? Do you mean from the time the image was made? Do you mean from the time the device was received? Because I don't know the information pertaining to the receipt of the device into evidence, and then I only have the documentation of the image forward. So I want to be clear about what period we're talking about.
It's an excellent point, and I am going to follow up with some questions.
Okay.
In an extraction, doesn't the extraction from a phone start with the raw data, raw image? You tell me, when someone brings a phone in, what's the first step that gets taken in order to do a full file extraction? What's the first step?
It depends. There's got to be steps with regard to network isolation. I need to know if the device is AFU or BFU at that point. So I don't have that information from this case, if that is the question. I get from the image forward.
So what I'd like to do, and this may be my last section of questioning, I'd like you to describe the ideal situation as to getting the most reliable data from an iPhone from the start. What's the most reliable way to do it?
I would say the most reliable way is following the recently released SWIG-DE Scientific Working Group on Digital Evidence document on best practices of evidence handling, preservation, and imaging. I may have that title slightly out of order, but it is the document released this January.
And tell me what that is.
Sure. In that, the first thing, from which point are we starting? Are we starting like extracting the data using a tool, or are we talking on scene, taking the device into evidence?
The latter.
Okay. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to ensure that you are isolating the device. This is also going to depend on condition from the network. So typically this would be done with a Faraday enclosure in a best practice. However, there are alternative ways of isolating from the network, such as disabling all of the communication protocols, such as Wi-Fi, airplane mode, etc. The next step, once you've isolated, but prior to, you also want to make sure you're continuing battery stat. So if a device is on, you want to keep it powered on. If it's off, you want to keep it powered off. That's a general statement. So the best way to do that is to attach a battery charger. Just like when your battery runs low, you plug in a charger in the back of these battery packs. We do that with that before we put it in the Faraday bag. A Faraday bag is an enclosure that blocks signals from coming to the device. This is so a remote wipe command couldn't be sent, or so that more data isn't received to the phone, because phones are live and constantly obtaining data. So we're going to have it with a battery pack in the Faraday, presuming it was on. Again, I don't know the status of this device. The next steps are going to depend on what state that device is, and what make and model that device is, and what the current support for that device is. There are multiple types of extraction methods of phones. In the modern day on iOS, a full file system image, what we had on the devices in question in this case, is considered the gold standard because it has the most robust information. So at this point, the next question is what's the best image type? And that's going to depend on if we have a passcode or if we don't have a passcode.
If I could,
please.
And I'm going to allow you to continue.
Yeah, please.
I want to break it down for the jury. So what I now want to do, you've stopped at a certain point, but you've talked about securing, what I would call securing the phone, right? And then making sure that there's no data swipes. You talked about airplane mode, Faraday bag, Faraday box, right? Do you know whether any of those protocols were followed for either the iPhone of Jen McCabe or John O'Keefe?
As I mentioned, I was not there for those processes. I don't have documentation of it. As mentioned, what started where my receipt of the device is from the image.
Exactly. So you don't know.
I can't testify to processes I did not or was not available or aware of.
Fair enough. But do you have a little bit of hint as to whether the phone of Mr. John O'Keefe was properly secured in airplane mode, a Faraday bag, or a Faraday box, based upon your own report of the iPhone of John McCabe? Can you determine that from page 5 of your report?
Obviously, there is data signals that are still being made and created. I believe that is what you're referring to. So the assumption is that I don't know at which point a Faraday bag is employed, but I also want to be clear, I don't know when, I don't have information outside of the digital forensics realm about this case, so I don't know precisely when the phone was taken into custody by law enforcement.
Fair enough. So assume that Mr. O'Keefe was deceased around the latest 9 a.m. on January 29th, 2022. Isn't there activity on that phone, health data activity, up to around noon of January 29th?
Health data activity would continue to be reported regardless of if the device was isolated from the network or not. Health data has to do with the movement of the device. So if the device was being moved even within a Faraday bag, that data would still be populated.
How about location data?
Location data is unlikely to be reported in a device that is Faraday enclosed, but I do not know what location data you're referring to, so I cannot speak in absolutes without having a better reference to the artifacts in question. If you're saying it's in my report, I'll look at it, but again, I never knew when the phone was seized, so it was not part of my initial analysis. Do I have permission to look at that time, Nick?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. So bear with me, it's a big report, as you know.
It is a big report.
And it was at the bottom of my stack.
Pardon me?
All right, it was at the bottom of my stack. I had to lift up the other ones to find it. All right, so.
Your Honor, may I assist and point her to a page?
Sure.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you. If you could turn to that report on your page 47 and continue on to page 50.
I do see incoming data that is consistent with the device not being Faradayed, such as the receipt of SMS messages, notifications from Ring, etc.
So, the iPhone of Mr. O'Keefe was not secured in the manner you described before we got to this, as would be the best practice with regard to getting the most accurate data from a phone. That is, once it comes in, that it's to either be put in airplane mode, Faraday bag, or Faraday box. That's correct. By your own report, you see activity.
I do see activity. It was not Faradayed. Faraday prevents wiping of the device and additional data. So actually, in this instance, it doesn't appear that the device was at risk of wipe because it was not wiped. And we actually have more data because we get to see the data that continue to come into the device. I'm not saying that's in accordance with best practice. I'm saying that that's what I see based off of what you just had me reviewing the data.
It sounds like you're trying to justify.
Oh, I'm not
if
trying to
right or
justify.
wrong, you tell me. It sounds like you're trying to justify the fact it wasn't secured. Am I correct? Or
No, you're incorrect. I'm just stating we have, you asked if we had more data or less data. We actually have more data with it not being Faradayed, but no, best practice would be to Faraday.
That
I
wasn't my
100%
question.
agree.
My question wasn't, is there more or less data? My question was simply, doesn't your own report
Sure.
show activity up until noon on January 29, 2022?
Correct. And for clarity, my scope was till noon, so I don't know if there was activity beyond that.
Right, but as far as your scope goes, I want to be clear.
Yeah.
There is activity on
Absolutely.
this phone,
Absolutely. The
which
phone,
shows that it was not put in airplane mode, it was not put in a Faraday bag, and it was not put in a Faraday box. And that failure is not best practice.
correct. It is not in accordance
Thank
with
you.
the best practices. I agree. I would have Faradayed it.
Thank you. So
If I,
that's
presuming all
okay.
things.
I have no further questions. Thank you for answering my questions, Ms. Hyde.
Thank you for your questions. Have a great day.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Of course.
That was 1 hour and 20 minutes.
You're welcome. You were asked when you began working on analyzing phones in this case, and you said it was in May. Was that of May of 2023?
May of 2023, May 4th, 2023 is the email I have of a note. Thank you. Yes. It's easy to remember because May the 4th be with you.
When you first were asked to begin work on this case in May of 2023, what was the catalyst for you to begin working on this?
I was contacted by Mr. Tully and then contracted, a SOW was signed, and I began work on the initial request to look at those two search terms on January 29th. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay.
Was there a certain claim that was lodged that you would have focused on?
I was to focus on the two search terms from January 29th, 2022.
And would you inform why? Was there any context to that?
Probably, I don't recall the exact conversation that I had with the DA's office and Lieutenant Tully at that time, but I'm assuming that I was given that context. I have in my notes that I was to look at those two searches on that date and do an analysis about those.
Were you asked to reach any particular result?
No, I was asked to provide my report, not to reach a particular result.
Were you asked to reach a conclusion that the 227 timestamp was inaccurate?
No,
When you engaged in your analysis, was it independent of the district attorney's office?
my analysis was independent of the district attorney's office. I actually, in the first case, had very little communication with the district attorney's office during the period of my analysis.
Was there any input from any outside source on what your result or ultimate opinions would be?
No,
Would you ever allow anybody to affect your input?
no.
Throughout the course of your efforts with this phone, have there been changes to software?
Absolutely. As mentioned on direct, software updates are near monthly.
I want to ask you about changes to the Celebrite software. You were asked about certain reports you wrote. Were the reports that you wrote relative to different requests for analysis?
Yes,
The report regarding report number 3, regarding changes to Celebrite software, was that report limited to the timestamp change, or was it to include other efforts?
the scope of that report, may I review what I have documented as the
Please.
scope? I believe we're talking about report 2. That's the one about the Celebrate change.
Yes.
And I have the request was to understand changes made in the newer version of Celebrate Physical Analyzer to artifacts pertaining to the timeline of a particular Google search on January 29, 2022, namely how's long to die in cold.
When you looked at the Celebrite software and report, was the timestamp characterization changed or removed?
Yes, it was removed. That timestamp in the version starting in May of 2024, Celebrite actually removed that, and they put a release note stating that it was due to the ambiguity and potential for misconstruing the meaning of that data.
Was there any other releases informing other reasons why that was changed other than the potential that somebody could misconstrue, misinterpret, or distort the information?
Can I read Celebrite's own statement?
Please.
Celebrite's statement in
To yourself.
to myself? Okay, roger that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh. Okay.
Can you
Could
repeat the
share with
question?
us,
Ma'am?
was there any reason other than the concern about misinterpreting or
They
distorting?
said that
So what's your understanding?
my understanding is that it is not a reliable timestamp, and that is why Celebrite removed it.
You were asked about Axiom. Axiom, is it the same or different?
Magnet Axiom and Celebrite Physical Analyzer are two different tools that both do forensic analysis of mobile phones.
You were asked whether Axiom still has a timestamp that was similar to Celebrite before the change.
Axiom shows what I spoke to on direct, where they have it as a parsed versus carved result. And so that particular result shows in the suspended state DB artifact as carved.
Do companies like Axiom and Celebrite give releases, updates, information about how to interpret their reports?
So Axiom actually has a document that's released with it called the Artifact Reference Guide. And that actually gives a brief description of the fields and of artifacts. All tools, when they release new artifacts, they put out in a release note. Not all artifacts are clearly documented that are parsed. However, all of the vendors regularly put out webinars and blog posts that explain their new artifacts, but not necessarily all.
Is there any releases or cautions from Axiom on the same issue about misinterpreting a timestamp?
Axiom, in their artifact reference guide for this artifact, does speak to the possibility of misinterpretation and states that the timestamp can be earlier than the search had occurred, based on what different reasons could cause that timestamp.
Let me ask you about a Faraday bag. You said that best practices is to isolate an item in a Faraday bag.
That's correct.
Do you have any information, or did you know the travel of Mr. O'Keefe's phone that night or where it went after?
I'm sorry, can you clarify the time period?
On January 29, 2022, from say 6:04 in the morning until later that afternoon.
I did not have access to that information.
When you analyze data from certain devices, are they always placed in a Faraday bag immediately after an incident?
There's a lot of times when this is situation dependent. An example of when you would not put something in a Faraday bag is when you have a deceased victim and you're going to be using their biometrics to possibly unlock the device. Because a Faraday bag is enclosed and then can't be opened, if your intent, if you don't have the password, is to use a deceased person's fingerprint to unlock the phone, we don't want to put the person's finger in the Faraday bag. So usually those phones would not be Faradayed, but they would typically have airplane mode enabled or SIM card removed. But no, SIM card removed doesn't actually work on iOS, so I won't get into that.
Understanding or having the opinion that this item was not placed in a Faraday bag at 6:04 in the morning, does that in any way affect your opinions about the data that you analyzed on this phone and the conclusions that you reached regarding Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
It does not have any impact on the conclusions other than the fact that it wasn't Faradayed and more data came in. So we have additional data.
You were asked a very specific question about history DB, and it was simply whether or not How's Long to Die in Cold, whether it appeared in history DB. That isolated question, does that provide any context to you and your analysis and conclusions about How Long to Die in Cold and that it occurred at 6:23 and 6:24 the next morning?
The absence of the history DB artifact doesn't mean that that search didn't occur at that time. We have multiple corroborating artifacts, which is usually what we look for, 2 artifacts that demonstrate is like very good. You don't necessarily need that, but in this instance, we have both from the Mobile Safari PLIS, which tracks the history, as well as the Knowledge CDB. So we do have 2 artifacts showing that those searches were done at that time. Of course, 6 seconds apart for the difference between the Knowledge C and the Mobile Safari PLIS.
On direct examination, you were not asked questions about Mr. O'Keefe's phone.
That is
but
correct.
You were on cross-examination, so let me follow up. You have a report that you authored regarding Mr. O'Keefe's phone,
That is correct.
and you had an opportunity to look at the healthcare data for January 29, 2022,
That is correct.
page 6 of your report.
Thank you.
You noted that there were steps that began at 12:11:09 a.m. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
And the way healthcare data works, do you have an understanding whether steps means a person actually took a number of steps, or does it mean something else?
Steps doesn't necessarily mean that you took a number of steps. It's based on the motion of the device. So it could be steps. It could be you're carrying it. It could be that you're in some other kind of motion. You could be on a bicycle. You could any number of things. And the number of steps is based on the presumed gait, based on the input into the Apple Health app in terms of gender and height. So it determines a gait and then prescribes a number of steps, but it is possible for other things to cause steps to occur.
You were asked specifically if you saw that there were reported movement or health steps at 12:21:10 a.m. and specifically pointed out to you notation or characterization of 80 steps. Is that accurate?
That is what's stored in the database. I try to clarify, as I did for you, sir, that that's what's stored in the database. I'm not saying that 80 steps were taken.
And by the way, in addition to the healthcare analysis, you did some analysis on the movement of a car, didn't you?
For Ms.
Your Honor.
I'm going to deny that question.
Can these health steps occur if somebody's holding a phone while traveling in a car?
As mentioned in my report, it's caused by motion. It could be various motions that could cause it. You could be using an elliptical. You could be in a vehicle. You could be on a bicycle. It's not necessarily steps taken.
Based on your analysis of Mr. O'Keefe's phone and the report that was pointed out to you on cross-examination, do you have information or opinion where Mr. O'Keefe's phone was located around 12:21:10 while those steps registered?
Objection, Your Honor. So,
That's beyond the scope of the class.
It was pointed out to you at 12:21:10 there was a registered 80 steps. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay. And then you were also asked about the last healthcare data, the last movements of this phone. And it was pointed out that began at 12:31:56 for 20 seconds.
That's correct. Per the data in the database.
And is that the last movement of Mr. O'Keefe's phone that evening before 6:04 that you saw when you analyzed the entire data in the phone?
May I have one moment to review?
Yes.
That appears to be the last before the 6 a.m. hour.
So that 20 seconds, if it began at 12:31:56, what was the last movement in seconds in time at that time of Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Yes, if that was a 20-second interval at 12:31:56, what was the last second that evening that Mr. O'Keefe's phone moved?
12:32:16.
And then when you analyzed the phone and were asked about these times, is there any movement between that last movement and 6:04:01?
Between the 12:32?
Yes, 12:32:16 and 6:04:01. Any movement of that phone whatsoever?
I do not have anything supporting that in my report.
Do you know what was going on with Mr. O'Keefe's phone at 6:04:01 a.m. on the morning of January 29, 2022?
I do not know precisely what was happening with his phone at that time in terms of movement. If that's, or are you asking me? I'm sorry. Can you clarify what you mean
Yes.
by the question?
The next movement after 12:32
Is the
16
6:04?
is 6:04:01
Correct.
a.m.
Correct.
Do you have any information about where or why there was movement of the phone at that time?
I don't. That wouldn't be inside my digital evidence. I don't believe.
And the last question is the next movement at 6:15:14. Do you know if that phone was being moved by somebody or somebody else than Mr.
The
O'Keefe?
phone was in motion. I do not know if it could be by a person. It could be on a rail car. I don't think it was on a rail car for clarity, but I don't know what is causing that motion at that time.
Thank you very much.
Any follow-ups, Mr.
Yes,
Lally?
please, Your Honor. We have a moment here. Excuse me. Go ahead. I know.
Thank you.
Ms. Hyde, you were asked questions by Mr. Brennan just moments ago about Celebrite and release notes. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
And did Celebrite, beyond stating that their opinion was the 2:20:40 a.m. timestamp was not reliable, did they give any reason at all for why they concluded it was not reliable in that? I'm sorry, we'll wait for the,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
and I'll repeat the question for you.
Thank you.
May I, Your Honor? Thank you. In that release note, does Celebrite state any reason for why they wrote not a reliable timestamp?
There are other.
I'm sorry, my
published, but
question
not
is, do they
Celebrite?
state in the release note whether there's a reason for why they concluded?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Your Honor.
And please try not to talk.
I will,
Sorry, Your Honor.
Thank you.
2.
Not asking you to read it, just asking whether or not they give any reason for the conclusion, not a reliable timestamp.
One moment. I'd like to review what they wrote. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Yes, they do. They state that further research since is the reason that they're doing it, that there's further research.
Did they state what that research is?
They don't, but
All right, but they don't state what the further research is.
that is correct. They
All right,
state
now
that
what I'd like
it's
to do is-
unreliable.
Move on to Axiom.
Mhm.
You were asked questions by Attorney Brennan, and you referred to Axiom as using a different parlance with the timestamp of carved, correct?
Celebrite uses this deleted demarcation or recovered demarcation. Axiom does not do that at all. They speak to how they recovered the artifact, be it that it was parsed. When I say parsed, I mean the item was where it was expected to be in the algorithm, found it, located it, and said it's here. versus carved, which is when they have to go into an unexpected area, such as slack space, which would be the areas that are not yet used or were previously used to extract the data from that.
So Axiom actually recovers the timestamp, but Celebrite does not. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
currently, previously, when we did the first case.
Right, but
it's the
currently,
opposite.
Celebrite
Correct.
doesn't, but Axiom does. Axiom recovers 2:27:40 a.m., correct? Timestamp? They
That
recover-
is the timestamp that they show for that artifact. Correct.
Exactly. So now I'd like to go back to the next topic, our discussion about Mr. O'Keefe's phone and secured or not. You talked about one example of maybe needing to use a biometric to unlock a phone. And that might be a reason, as I understand it, as to why someone might not put it in a Faraday bag or box. Do I have that correct?
Correct.
Okay, do you know whether the passcode was immediately provided on the phone of Mr. O'Keefe?
I do not have that information.
Assume that the passcode was immediately provided for the phone of Mr. O'Keefe. Can you think of any other reason why that phone wouldn't be put in airplane mode, Faraday bag, or Faraday box?
Best practice would be to put it in a Faraday bag.
Okay.
Sorry.
And that phone was obviously not put in airplane mode, Faraday box, or Faraday bag after 6:04 a.m. on January 29, 2022, correct?
Correct.
Now let's go to,
Well, I don't know if at some point past 12 o'clock. My report only goes to noon, so just for clarity, I don't know
Fair enough.
anything past noon.
fair enough, but from 6:04 a.m. until approximately noon on
Correct.
January 29, 2022, at least that time, that phone is not in airplane mode in a Faraday bag or a Faraday box, correct?
It would appear such. Because I didn't analyze past that, I don't know if it had been potentially Faradayed and then it broke Faraday and got data, but I don't suspect that based on this. It appears that that data was live. But I just have to speak to the fact that I just don't know because I didn't go past noon.
Right, but you're going past noon.
Right.
I'm not.
Okay.
My
yeah.
question,
6
and
a.m. to
I'm-
noon, it does not appear to be Faraday.
So to be clear, from 6:04 a.m. on January 29, 2022 until at least noon of January 29, 2022, the iPhone of Mr. O'Keefe is not in airplane mode, it's not in a Faraday bag, and it's not a Faraday box, correct?
Unless it was in a broken Faraday bag, like they put it and it was failing. But it does not appear to have been placed in Faraday bag.
All right.
Well, I'm just being honest. You should test your Faraday bags. They go bad. I use Dr. Katz's testing methodology, but 100%, it appears to have been receiving signal for that entire period and not in a Faraday bag, which would be best practice unless biometrics were needed.
So let's now go to hopefully what are the last two categories of questions. With regard to the iPhone of Jen McCabe, do you have any knowledge as to whether over 200 calls were auto-deleted on her phone? You analyzed it.
We can see that calls were auto-deleted. You're asking me if the number of, I just want to make sure I understand the question. If the number of calls that were auto-deleted, if that exceeded 200?
My question is, do you know whether there was auto deletions on Jen McCabe's phone? Do you know that?
I'm uncomfortable with the term auto deletions because
How
I
about
don't know
deletions?
what that is inferring.
Okay. Did you analyze her phone at all for deletions?
I analyzed her phone to see if there had been deletions of call logs. And what I found was that there were records that were removed by the system and not recoverable from that database, but were recoverable from biomes.
Understood. Now, what I'd like to do is to address your answer in response to Mr. Brennan's questions, where you said that the issue with regard to Mr. O'Keefe's, or just generally your proposition, that there was no impact on your conclusion because more data had been obtained. Did I get that correct?
I believe my statement was there was no impact on my conclusion with the fact that it had not been in a Faraday.
Right. So isn't it, though, the case that when a phone's not in a Faraday and is therefore active, data can be overwritten?
Yes.
So if data can be overwritten when it's not in a Faraday, you can lose that data, correct?
Is there data that we're concerned? Yes, theoretically.
Right.
Yes.
You talked about, in response to Attorney Brennan, the 12/31/56 steps, and you said the last, according to you, last movement 12/32/16. Do you recall those questions?
I recall the questions.
Yeah. To boil it down, isn't it correct that that phone was moving at that time?
May I check the timestamp again? I
Absolutely.
apologize. There's
Oh, no.
a lot of
Please-
timestamps going back and
Please
forth.
do.
12/31/56? Is that
Yeah,
the?
that's the start. Yep.
Oh, yes, this one there definitely is. Yes.
So, doesn't matter what kind of movement, but that phone was moving starting at 12/31/56 and still moving until 12/32/16 a.m. on January 29, 2022, correct?
Yes,
Thank you. Appreciate again you answering my questions.
thank you.
All right, Ms. Hyde, you're all set.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Or I see counsel about scheduling. First, feel free to stand up and stretch.
And there we go. It is 3:30. She's going to talk to them about scheduling, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're done for the day. I think the judge is headed. Are you all asleep? I am really kind of winding down. Like, seriously. Number 12. Ding, ding. Number 12 on sidebars. We have a new record. Please stop shouting. She's going you very honest on. I hope you're not talking to me. Do you mean me? Am I that loud? I'm sorry, Liam. Oh, I know Alessi got me. I had to turn my headphones down. Here we come back. It's a shorter one than usual. I wonder if they're still on schedule. Nope, we're going to call a witness. Yay. Or we're going to play some clips.
May I?
Play.
Yes.
I would like to play clip 15.
Yes. Yeah, send me out with a good clip of Karen's own words.
Absolutely more than Jen McCabe. Jen McCabe, it's me or her. Either I'm going down, Jen, or you are.
Oh. Well,
So, folks, I talked to the lawyers briefly about scheduling at Sidebar, and I'm told we're actually ahead of schedule. So with that, rather than beginning a witness who's probably going to take a while, we may as well let you go and enjoy the rest of this beautiful afternoon. So we're on schedule, ahead of schedule. We'll reevaluate that tomorrow. Now you will see lawyers at Sidebar asking for as well about talk a little bit about scheduling. Those same cautions, please. Do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, please disregard it and let us know. And be very careful with your social media use. So see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
All right, to the court, please.
all right. Jury is dismissed. We are out.
Come on up.
And of course, they're going to do a sidebar and scheduling. So I'll leave it up just in case. I mean, why not? Huh? Wow. How about that clip, huh? How about that? Let's go out with that. Hey, Jen McCabe, it's either me or you. Look, she's so threatening. It actually shows the defense's angle coming right from Karen. Like, we got to discredit Jen McCabe. She knows too much about what I did that morning. Disregarded Massachusetts. I do think there was a lot there that, although she was a very well educated, really knows her stuff witness, there was just a lot of extra extrapolated. There was a lot of stuff going on. Too much. I think it is going to be difficult for the jury. I do. One thing I'd like to know, make note of, is that Victoria George, remember the ex-juror who joined David Yannetti, the defense's team, the defense's law firm, just for jury selection. And then she was there, and she hasn't been back since. She's no longer listed on Yannetti's website either as an attorney with his firm. Might have just been a consulting tip, like a little consulting job, like just a temporary gig. Serves their purpose. Put her on the website and everything just to get everybody going. But don't look like it was long term. If she's still at the firm, they took her off the website. But there are other reasons they could have took her off the website too. I will give a nod to that. They could have easily removed her from the website due to harassment, or people knowing where she was, or being contacted unnecessarily. If you have any interest in tech at all, that was pretty good testimony. I enjoyed it. What was just shown? Karen Reed being not so nice. Her own words. I would play it again. It's basically Karen Reed threatening Jen McCabe. After Jen McCabe got up so early in the morning in the middle of a blizzard to try to help her look for John O'Keefe and help a very upset person who didn't understand what was going on. And she even tried to help her at the site when she was talking too much. Oh, it just really is quite distasteful. Shows you what kind of person she is. Oh. In the morning session, behind Karen Reed, it was kind of sparse looking as far as people from what I see, but it looks like after lunch they filled in the seats. They called in the troops. But I thought it was interesting. People were reporting that the lawyers are no longer having lunch with the Reed family anymore, that they're lunching separate. Been a couple of days, all week actually. So sidebar on scheduling. This is the second day in a row that we finished a little bit early as far as witness testimony. We'll have a new witness tomorrow. We had just one today, very long. Technical witnesses like this with technical information to offer usually do take long, especially with this defense and their very long cross-examinations or dissections or whatever you want to call them. I think, do you think that the defense, that if the jury, do you feel at this point that the jury realizes that they're trying to be led astray? I mean, I found a lot of it very interesting, but it is, to me, of course, it's very obvious. I know that's what they're trying to do. especially when he takes one word out of one sentence to try to apply it to something else somewhere else. It gets a bit, you know, and trying to discredit the other expert with her was a bit. I mean, if it worked, it would have been like great. Well, it really didn't. She just kept saying, "I can't attest to somebody else's work, and I'm not going to actually say anything definitive if I can't actually analyze the extrapolation and the data itself." She said she has a process of taking the stuff from the database. She actually tests the database itself before she does anything. So why would she? Oh, that would have been from one of her interviews, Teach Daniel. Most of the clips being played are from the many interviews Karen Reed did. They're all able to be entered into evidence since Karen Reed chose to decide to go out there and make it all public. Yeah, Aunt Germ, that's true. She says, I feel like if you're a juror and you don't assume that both sides are trying to lead you astray, you're a bad juror. Exactly. Exactly. They're both trying to win you over at all times. It's up to you to decide on credibility, what actually looks like a real fact, what actually just looks like muddy in the water, you know. Yeah. Part of being a juror. Basically, it's all in just what seems reasonable to you. Oh, excuse me. Yawning online. Oh, yawning in public. I do hope tomorrow we have some faster paced witnesses. We shall see. We shall see. What is the court waiting for right now? There's a sidebar going on with the attorneys in Judge Cannone in regards to scheduling. I guess they're discussing witness order and whether any issues are going to come up. I would imagine that Judge Cannone is also reminding them if they have a problem with the witnesses coming off. She wants to know now instead of like right before they're supposed to come. She seemed really annoyed about an oral argument being made in the middle of trial with a witness that was waiting to take the stand. Yeah. We're still at it would be, did that make it 13? That makes it 13. Doesn't it, Rocket? Because we passed 11 to 12, and then this last one would be 13. I lost count. Like, he was putting me to sleep. Unless he had me all flustered. I know.
Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Okay, that's it. She's done. She said, see you tomorrow morning. So that was that. I'm sure they just went over witnesses. Yep, there we go. All right. So that'll be it for me then, guys. No stream tonight. Well, I'm going to head off for a nap. First a walk, get some fresh air. But what a day. Thank you all for hanging out, keeping me company. Made it much more pleasurable to have the conversations in the side chat. And we will leave Couch with his favorite picture of the fan, a close up there, for a minute, you know. And on that, I will see you all tomorrow morning. Yes, for more. Yes, we're actually going to come back. Glutton for punishment. That we will be back tomorrow morning around 8:50, 8:55. Please, if you have any comments or questions or anything you want looked up, anything you need clarified, hit the back of the videos, any of the videos. I do get the comments and I will answer and get that ready for you. In the meantime, have a great night. stretch, get some fresh air, have yourself a coffee, or at this point, a drink. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Good night.